Hey everyone, it's Nightharo here, and today we're going to talk about the Arcanist Healer. This is something moving forward that I think will be meta. So of course we're on the PTS right now. It's only the first week of the PTS, so things will certainly change. But I know that some people, including my wife, are on the PTS right now and considering using an Arcanist, bringing it to group to try out the new trial and do some other stuff. So I wanted to go ahead and talk about it. So what I've done here is I've set up an Arcanist, and I've put all the non-Arcanist skills on one bar just for ease of use. These are the skills I think you would normally use with this build, with the setup here. So of course we have Echoing Vigor, which is a sticky hot for our group. We have Healing Springs. You can use the other morph, but I think Healing Springs is kind of a little bit better right now. And then Combat Prayer, Energy Orb, Wall of Elements. Obviously this is on our resto bar, that's why it's grayed out here. And then you can still run Barrier on your front bar for the extra passives for the recovery. But let's go ahead and talk about the Arcanist specific things, okay? So we'll start off with our single target heal here, and that's going to be Evolving Runemend. And what this does is it basically just heals one target in front of you in a cone for a little over 10,000 health, and then it puts a small hot on them. Each crux that you use will reduce the cost of this. Honestly, the other morph of this gives a target minor heroism when they're under 50% health. It, very, very rarely is going to be used, but also this heal over time is really weak. So I don't know if there's a great argument to be made for either one of these. Really, neither one of them shines very much. And honestly, like it consuming the crux is kind of a bad thing for a healer. And we'll talk about that more in a second. Next up here, our largest AoE heal over time is going to be Reconstructive Domain. Now, this ability gives Minor Courage, which you would normally get from Claw of Yolnahkriin, which is a 5-piece set worn by a tank, typically. It also gives Minor Fortitude, Minor Intellect, and Minor Endurance, which increases your recoveries of health, magic, and stamina by 15%. There's a lot of classes that can give this buff, but there's no class that can give the Minor Courage buff, so you're going to be using this a lot. And you know what? Let me go ahead and demonstrate what these look like. So we'll start off here with our single target heal, and this is what it looks like. And you can see it pops up and heals several times in a row, and then there's a heal over time. I don't know why it ticks 3 times, I guess so that the crits are more consistent in a trial setting, so you'll typically get 1 crit out of the the 3 heals, as opposed to sometimes getting a crit, sometimes not getting a crit. That's my best guess with why they did that. I have no idea why. And then next up is our Reconstructed Domain. Now, you could use the other morph of this, and what this does, this gives us our buffs and gives us a small heal. This is about half the heal of a Healing Springs, so it ticks for about the same amount, but it only ticks every 2 seconds. You can see it's quite large. If your group is mobile or moving a lot, you will have to be recasting this quite often. The other alternative there is to actually go with the other morph of this. Now, you'll see Xena's Empowering Disc. This doesn't actually heal you at all, but it does last. It says for 7 seconds here. When it's fully leveled, it's actually 10 seconds. And so targets, if you're in highly mobile fights like the new trial, you could move out of it a lot. I kind of think that it will probably not be used very often because this is such a large AoE, and only on really mobile fights will you see that being used in a lot of situations. So I don't know. We'll have to see. Having a little bit of a heal over time is kind of nice, and in most fights, I think this is going to work just fine. But this is how we're going to be getting our Minor Courage. So you're going to see Claw of Yolnahkriin basically go away in the new meta. Now moving on here to Chakram of Destiny. Now this skill actually looks really cool. I really like this. Let's see if we can get it going here. Yeah, so you can throw it, and you kind of see the Xena thing going on. I guess they just embraced that. Had some Xena fans from back in the day. So you throw this out, and you can see it proc on targets, or it procs on you if you're not pointing at anybody or nobody's in range. It puts a almost 10k shield on them for 6 seconds. It's only 4 targets, so you might have to cast this several times if you're in a group. I think it's a great ability. I think it'll be used a lot. It could be used a lot in a new trial. I think the biggest use of this is situations where you're in highly mobile fights where throwing down ground hots is just not useful. So I think you'll be using this a lot in the new trial, for example. The other morph of this, I'll note, consumes Crux to make it a little bit cheaper. I don't think you need to really make it cheaper, so that's why I didn't go with it. The other thing is, and we'll talk about this in a second, it's extremely hard and kind of pointless to produce Crux on a healer. So you kind of could just ignore Crux altogether. For those who don't know, Crux are those little triangles that float around your character, and basically they give you different things depending on whatever. So Healing Tides here gives you 3% heals per active Crux. You could have up to 3. So you can get 9% healing by generating Crux. And then generally speaking, the only thing that is really going to consume your Crux, either the other morph of the Chakram of Destiny will make it cheaper and consume Crux, which is kind of nice, but otherwise not needed. And then the only other thing is the Evolving Rune Mind will consume Crux to reduce the cost of this ability. So each active Crux reduces the cost of this ability as well, the Evolving Rune Mind, and it can with the other morph of Chakram of Destiny here. And then with Curative Surge, it consumes the Crux to give Magicka and Stamina recovery to your allies in the area. Again, none of these things are really anything to write home about, and I don't think they're really needed. And so you're going to have to be generating Crux to then use it for something you really don't need. Really, I think what you'd prefer is to generate the Crux and then to just use the passive to increase your healing. And I think that's going to be the primary use of this. Crux on a healer right now feels kind of pointless and kind of useless. All right, but anyways, so we've got a shield. We've got a small AoE heal that provides some major buffs that we definitely want to be using. We've got a single target heal that works pretty well, it looks like. Nothing to write home about, but nothing terrible. And then we've got our next ability is Curative Surge. Now, this ability looks super cool and seems really awesome. Here, you can't really see it real well. There we go. So it puts a line in front of you, and it heals a lot in that line. Now, I chose, and I'm recommending Curative Surge right now. Again, take this with a grain of salt. These things could change. They rebalance things because it ramps up the heal over time. The other one heals targets at low health for a bit more, but I think this is probably the better morph right now. I'll just note, you really got to be pointing at somebody. Like, they have to definitely get hit. There's no bonus area. They have to be in that 1 meter area in front of you, or they're not going to get healed. So everybody has to be stacked up really tight for this heal to actually work. So it's going to be very situational and completely useless in other situations. So I do think you're going to be spamming your shield a lot as kind of like instead of a large heal for people outside of the group. So you'll probably see the shield being used, and again, you might... Oh, is this plant a creature? What is going on right now? Okay, that's... My wife's going to love that. We can heal the plants. We can protect the plants. Protect the plants! All right, so yeah, that's that. And then the last thing you're definitely going to want to have is going to be Rune of the Colorless Pool. So what this rune does, and you definitely want this morph, is it, and this is from non-resto, non-curative rune forms skill line here. This is actually from the tanking one, the Soldier of the Apocrypha down here. So the reason you want Rune of the Colorless Pool is because it's going to provide both minor vulnerability and minor brittle for 20 seconds, which is huge when it's maxed out. So that's a pretty big deal. If you don't have a Brittleton in group, or if you don't have a Warden, typically you would. So probably you don't need the minor vulnerability, but the minor brittle is nice because a lot of groups don't have a Warden, and they're requiring tanks to run double eye staff so that they can provide the minor brittle, and then they have to cast that every 4 seconds. It's really hard to keep up. So it's much better to have on a DPS, or now we can just use this ability and it lasts for 20 seconds. I will note that when I've tried this on mobs, it's been very glitchy as to if it works or not. So we'll see if it's actually working in content a little bit later on today, but in theory, this could work. Oh yes, and I'll also note, I've got a question from a friend on console about this reconstructive domain, and they were wondering, both morphs, how many people it actually procs on. Typically, your heals only proc on 6 targets. Even though they just kind of say they're an AoE heal, it actually only affects 6 people inside of the AoE. So we'll have to see if that's the case with this reconstructive domain or not. But I'll get back with you on that when I am able to test it. And then the last thing here is going to be the Glyphic of the Tides. So this is our ultimate. And again, that's from the Curative Rune form, which is the healing skill line. And what this does is when you cast it, and here, I'll just go ahead and throw it out. So it's going to spawn in at low health. And then what can happen is that we can actually heal it up. I don't know why I'm not seeing a health bar on it. I must have my health bars off, but you can actually heal it, and as you do, it does more, gives you more of a benefit, okay? So this lasts for 15 seconds. It gives you 200 weapon and spell damage and healing you and your allies, and that happens every 1 second. And it's in a 50-meter area on the ground, so fairly large. And again, it's supposed to grow stronger, I guess, with the heal. I'm not sure about the weapon and spell damage scaling on that just yet. But this is an ultimate that will be used quite often, I think, in the future. So probably you'll have this on your Pillager's healer, and they'll be just using it every chance that they get just to increase the group's DPS or holding it for certain DPS windows. But in general, I think they'll just be popping it as soon as they can. And I think that's it. I think this is what the 6 skills you're going to be using on an Arcanist. The one other thing I would say is that you might want some way to be able to generate Crux. I think that'll happen fairly often. Hopefully they tweak it so that Crux is actually useful for something in most situations. But if you need Crux, I think probably, I don't know how to say this, Cephaliarch's Flail is going to be a really good option, or Writhing Ruin Blades is going to be a good option. And since you're a magic user, you're stacking mag, this Writhing Ruin Blades is going to cost Magicka, and this is still going to cost Stamina, so you have your choice of which one you want to use. I'll actually just pop these on a bar here. I'll pop them on the other bar so we can kind of see what they look like. So a couple of notes about the Writhing Ruin Blades is this seems a little glitchy. So you'll see that it doesn't always generate Crux. So I think probably the Stam Focused Cephaliarch's Flail is better. Let me just find a mob here. You can't generate Crux outside of combat. That doesn't seem like it's a thing. So you do have to be in combat. So let me go find something to attack. Hey, there's something. All right, so... so this is the Stamina Morph one. And actually that didn't generate Crux for me either. So maybe you have to be in combat or something. Yeah, there we go. I can't even target this guy. I had this problem earlier where I wasn't able to target a lot of things. So I don't know what's the deal with that. I can't target this thing with anything. That seems to be a problem here. Let's see if we can target this guy. Hey, there we go. Throw a couple of runes at him. And you can see we generate the Crux there. And then if we cast something that consumes it, get a little bit bigger heal on this. Or maybe it was just cheaper. I forgot which one does what. And then you can see we can generate more Crux. Maybe we still can't target this guy. There's a lot of these Quamas that seem to be not targetable, and they seem to be Quamas of different types here. So we'll just run away. But anyways, so you see what Crux looks like, and then just having it active will increase your healing. So that's it for this quick guide. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully it gives you kind of an idea of the 5 or 6 skills that you want on your bar in most situations. I think for a lot of people, you're not always going to need this single target heal. Just like most other classes, so you're going to be dropping that quite a bit. You could definitely throw on something to generate Crux in lieu of that. If you did have a Brittled in for some reason and you had a Warden already applying your minor vulnerability, Wardens normally apply minor vulnerability. And so you typically don't need that, but the Brittle, again, is very helpful. Also, with this Reconstructive Domain, this is something you might want to go with a non-healing morph, just because it gives the buff when people leave the target for 10 seconds. So you'll pretty much always have the buff up in that situation, and the heal isn't too crazy that you absolutely have it. So it kind of depends on the fight. It could be one where it's a little bit annoying, where you might want one, you might want the other. Probably we'll figure out which one is better. Probably it won't be the heal, because we'll want to make sure we keep the buff up times in most groups, and so we won't have to cast it as much either, but just something to keep in mind. And then Chakram of Destiny. This, again, you could use both morphs. One morph makes it a bit cheaper. The other morph, if you recast it early, will make the shield stronger. The only reason to use this morph is because I think, generally speaking, you don't want to consume Crux on a healer, and you don't really need the extra sustain. So that's why I chose the Chakram of Destiny, which is kind of a bad reason. So, yeah, not super impressed with that. Glyph of the Tides is going to be a great ultimate. We're going to be using it a lot. You're going to be popping it a lot. So definitely nothing wrong with this. So that's cool. We'll be using that quite often. And then, and I said, this might be on the Pillager's Healer. I'm not sure. You might want to have your Pillager's Healer save up more ultimate. But in general, it's definitely going to be being used consistently on your supports. And then, again, Curative Surge here. I think this is a pretty cool heal when everybody is really stacked up. It's completely useless, or maybe not completely, but it's not going to be very good other than that. I mean, it might be a little bit of fun to have to chase around groups and try to, since healers are already trying so hard to heal people, to have to, try to point your mouse at them to get them to heal. That's not going to cause motion sickness or anything. So, it's kind of interesting. In really mobile fights like the new trial, I think it's mostly going to be useless. So this will be a flex spot. And yeah, I guess that's it. I think we already talked about the colorless pool. So yeah, overall, it's the abilities look cool. So that's cool. I don't know. I think that's kind of all there is to say about that. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys. We'll catch you in the next one.